All right. Well, should we hop into the show?
Let's do
Dude,
it.
guys, what's the responsibility of a marketer?
Oh man,
The responsibility of a marketer.
I was just thinking that in the shower today. I was like, what is the responsibility?
Dude,
So-
Brandon, I actually, every morning I wonder, what's Brandon thinking about in the shower right now? So I'm glad you answered
that was
that.
today's shower thought. Was what is the responsibility? I'm trying to see. Hold on here. So here's why I was thinking about it. I was listening to an interview. Well, I was half listening and then half reading, like kind of show notes, so to speak. There's this marketer I follow. He's it's Matthew Kobach, whatever. He's like the head of social for the New York Stock Exchange. And since this quarantine stuff, he's been going live on Instagram like once a week, like Thursday nights, and he'll just interview one-on-one someone else who's like a professional marketer, and they just talk about whatever their expertise is. So, influencer marketing, how to do affiliate marketing, and it's not really how to do. It's just like their experience. Really, they're pretty good conversations. He's a good interviewer. And it's not even his job. He's just like naturally good at it. And one of the recent conversations he had with a woman, and they were talking about diversity in marketing, which is obviously a big subject right now. And as I was just kind of going through the show notes, and I was looking at like what people were really tweeting about within the conversation, there was one of the things where she was saying how if you go and you Google white man, and then you go and you Google black man, when the black man, you're going to see a lot of mugshots in the Google images, and then the white, you're not. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I got to see this. And I went and searched it, and I even double checked this morning, and it's like the opposite. Like the white man was mostly mugshots, and the black was, I think there was like 4 mugshots above the fold on my monitor. But she was saying that it's the responsibility of marketers to change that, which then got me thinking, not necessarily about this particular issue, so to speak, but what is the responsibility of a marketer? Because when you're hired for a company, right, like 97th Floor hires me, my job primarily is to bring in more leads for the company, right? And then also to elevate the brand of 97th Floor. Those are like the 2 big responsibilities that I have. It was never, hey, we need you to change public perception on X issue, or we need you to push on this. However, from a public perspective and within certain groups within the marketing community, it seems like there's this growing pressure for marketers to go beyond sell product X and also we need you to push this and this and this, which is just interesting, right? And so it got me thinking, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think, like, obviously with all the issues going on right now, I'm looking at, okay, let's say we're a marketer and we go back to when like slavery was in full force in the country, and you're marketing some bread company, right? And I don't know, we'll say TV exists, but I guess this is before even TV, but maybe it's print magazine, and you decide, because you're like, man, this slavery stuff is really wrong. Like, we should not be pushing this, but I got to sell bread. And so your job as a marketer, if you're going by today's pressure, is I'm going to make the main character of my bread ad an African-American man. And because I think that's the right thing to do, we need to show, equality and whatnot. There's a high chance that your bread company is going to get destroyed because you're going against this huge status quo, right? Like, you're doing something that you yourself know is right, but public perception at that time is very, very different, right? And so I guess that's where it's that interesting balance of, is, like, I don't know, like, where does the responsibility lie for a marketer? Like, are we responsible? And we've talked about ethics marketing, stuff like that before. I feel like this is a little bit different to
One of my favorite topics.
There's being ethical and there's not being ethical, right? Like, I feel like a little bit more black and white, versus I as a marketer, or we as a company, well, me as a company maybe is different, but like, we believe something that's different than society. Is it our responsibility? Like, we can choose. Ben & Jerry's chooses to go and take a lot of social issues that are very important to them, and they push that, and they ingrain it into the product, and it works. Is it Ben & Jerry's marketing team's responsibility to do that? I don't know. That's where my thoughts, that was just a thought going through my head. I'd love to get like any knee-jerk reactions that you guys have on that. if there are any.
I only have 2 knees, but I have more reactions than that.
All right, fair enough.
Let's hear it.
As you were talking, different things kept popping into my head. One was, is a marketer, does their responsibility go beyond that of what is dictated by the company? I mean, you mentioned Ben and Jerry's. I imagine Ben and Jerry's, the top leadership puts upon the marketers the responsibility of pushing forward their message. But other companies don't have that same mentality. And some marketers don't have the power to do what they think is right. An example of that, well, maybe this isn't a great example, but it's more another question to add to your already well thought out question. We're in a situation, I say I'm in a situation where I look at data on Vivint Solar's website, and there are 4 ways someone can become a lead. They can call in, they can submit a form, they can chat in, or they can go through an e-commerce flow with a shopping cart and kind of do it themselves. Well, if you look at the conversion rates of each, a call converts way higher than anything else. And then it goes form, and then chat, and then e-commerce. Like e-commerce is like, to give you an idea, the conversion rate on a call is like 6.38%. And on e-commerce, it's 0.37%. Okay. So if I ask you, which of those would you make more prominent? The obvious answer would put a phone number everywhere. Well, if you look at the website, it's way more form centric. In fact, even the e-commerce flow, it has a more prominent spot. So this question is coming up in my mind where I'm saying, as a marketer, I'm saying it's my responsibility to acquire new customers. So logically, I'm going to take the highest converting method, which is a phone call, and make the website call centric. But there are other people in the company and around the world, I imagine, who say you should put the channel that is most wanted by the customer. What does the customer want? Do they want to submit a form? If most people want to submit a form, then you should put a form out there rather than a phone number. So I think it falls in line with what you're saying is, what's a marketer's responsibility? And this isn't a moral thing. This is, should I put in front of people what they want or what they think they want, or should I put what converts better? Does that make sense? Even though most people want a form, I know that if I put a phone number before a form, even if they want a form more, they're going to call because it's more prominent. It's more available. So do you put the customer's wants first, or do you assume that they don't know what they want and put a phone number because that converts better and it's better for the business?
Yeah, but do those rules change though when it comes to, because at the same time, your job as a marketer is to change public perception, right? Specifically the product or the brand that you're working with. You want to change people who either don't know about you to change them to know about you, or they don't like you and now they like you. Like, that's part of your job as a marketer, is to change public perception. Does that bleed into issues? Because you're still talking within the realm of your company, right? So maybe you're using that as the rule of thumb, saying, well, that should just be how it applies everywhere, which in that case is our job to be more of a mirror of society. Like if I'm diving into TikTok, there might be a trend that I think is really, really stupid, but people in that world love that trend, even though I think it's a really stupid trend. It's my job as a marketer to change their perception and say, no, your trend is stupid. Here's a better trend. Or is my job as a marketer to understand how these collective, this group of people are thinking, and I go in and I talk like them, so to speak, right?
I think you need to do, like going back to Jacob's example, you need to do what the customer wants, but not necessarily what they want is to have solar panels or to learn more about solar panels. And if the way they want to get there is through a form, but the better way to get there is through a call, then you're actually helping them get what they want, even though it goes against what the numbers are saying they want in that moment. So the ultimate end result is what they want, and you're helping them achieve that through ways that they might not have identified without your help.
Yeah, in most cases, they want answers. They have questions,
Right.
right?
And if the best way to do that truly is a phone call, even if that is not
Which it is.
even if a phone call is not truly what they want, at the end of the day, what they actually want are answers to their questions. And if a phone call is the best way to do that, then you should push them to a phone call.
Yeah.
So I would say it is about what they want, but I don't know that people are always the best about, I don't know, best at, I guess, identifying exactly what they want. Although, I mean,
I think
Brandon's,
you're right.
to Brandon's question, I think as marketers, it matters. Like, it doesn't matter at all what we think personally and what we think is interesting or cool. What we need to do is understand the landscape in which people are living and respond and communicate in that landscape so that we can be effective marketers. If we're totally, if we think, hey, everything that's going on is so dumb, and then we ignore it and we don't address it in any way, to a lot of people, again, it depends on who our market is, that's going to come off wrong. And so we're not doing a good job as marketers. So I think you were right in your second statement that our job is to understand what people are thinking and talk to them where they are.
So going way back then to the original statement in this interview I was listening to, which there's a lot of really good stuff in the interview, of the statement that it's marketers' job to change what's going on, because in this person's eyes, they're looking at this saying, this isn't fair. Like when I type in one accurate one I did see, I think, and it was if you type in professional haircut, it was a lot of white males, well-groomed suits, like, your typical models that you see on all these big magazines. You type in unprofessional haircut, it was a lot of African-American men with like weird hairs and stuff like that. A lot of people will say marketers are responsible for changing this. Google, you could say, is really doing their job of mirroring society, right? Like that's their job, is provide information. When you type in something, Google is going to show you, here's what the world thinks on this subject. Sorry.
Yeah, they're capturing intent. And in most cases, when someone searches for that, they're serving up what people are looking for and not necessarily what Google themselves would serve up.
No, I guess the greater question is
not really. That's what they're trying to do. But the images that are ranking are not because that's what people are looking for. It's because either that's the only image, it's properly optimized. It happens to be on a site that has someone doing SEO and the other sites don't.
Mm-hmm.
It has links to it for whatever reason that has nothing to do with the actual image itself. So I don't know that Google actually does a good job of returning things that people actually want to see. It tries to do that, and that's its never ending goal.
I think in most cases it does. They've been doing it for 20 years. That's what they've been trying to do for 20 years.
The fact is that you said most cases. So
I would argue that in most cases it does.
Right. And that's my point, is most cases it does, not all the time.
So why are you disagreeing?
Because you're making it sound like they're returning results based off of people's interests, which is not true.
I absolutely think that's true.
No way, man. Like an article does not rank higher just because people like it. It ranks higher because it has links, because it has shares or whatever.
That's part of it. But if it ranks and then people are going to it, and then we've talked about this, they pogo stick or think.
But you started off with saying if it ranks. What if it has to rank first for Google to be able to measure whether people like it?
Most pages are not ranking, right? 99% of pages don't rank. The pages that do rank are likely the ones Google cares about, and they're the ones that for 20 years have tried to optimize for intent. Mm-hmm. I think in most cases, they're serving up what people are looking for, and people find what they're looking for. I would argue that over 90% of the time someone types something in, they're finding what they're looking for first try.
I think you're right, but my point is,
you're
only
accusing
90%.
me of saying that that's not true.
No, I'm accusing you of saying that the reason it's ranking is because people want to see it.
I think in most cases they're mutually exclusive.
Sure,
part of optimizing
just
is
because
it's
not
intent.
the cause. It's not the cause. Is all I'm saying.
I think
if there's a piece of content. How's that? How do they even measure that before they even know the other ranking signals? So brand new piece of content Google's never seen before. Yeah,
as soon as something
people
ranks,
want to see it,
people are interacting with it, and that interaction changes its rankings.
Yeah, I don't know. I think recipes are a perfect example of this.
And I honestly think we're getting nitpicky at each other, where I think we agree that in most cases, Google is serving up what people are looking for.
People are not looking for unprofessional hair. When they search unprofessional haircut, they're not necessarily looking for African Americans. It just happens to be.
We don't know that, but I would agree, but we don't know that.
You're right. We don't know that, but I don't think that's the case.
I don't think it's the case either.
So I think as marketers, it's not our responsibility to go out and change Google results. I think it is our responsibility to say, like, if our market contains people of different ethnicities or whatever, represent that in our marketing. And if I think sometimes people unintentionally stick to like one demographic or whatever when they they have these 3 models, and those 3 models happen to be white dudes, and then they take all their pictures and they have great SEO and they rank. I think the mistake was not getting those images to rank. The mistake was at the beginning, which is, hey, if your market is more diverse, like, represent that in your marketing.
So here's my question. Like, Google is not racist. Like, it's not like the algorithm has racism built into it. Although I don't know, maybe it does. I
be a
can't
breaking
see how
story.
That would work.
Well, no, there's been a lot of talk about the algorithm being racist over the past couple of years.
Well, yeah, and I wonder how that is. I mean, this is a good example where it's like unprofessional haircuts. Google is built on, just like you said, optimized websites. So if those websites are optimized for those images, like how is it that Google would be built to show African Americans hair based on unprofessional haircuts?
Yeah, I don't think that is an example of Google's algorithm being racist.
One example was, I'm pretty sure this was real. I don't believe it was a meme. And I bet you guys remember it when I say it. There's the images of someone typing in, white man stole my car. And then Google suggests was like, did you mean black man stole my car? And then that was screenshot. And it's like, oh, look, Google's, the algorithm is racist. Is the algorithm racist, or is it simply being a mirror to saying, look, more people statistically are searching this word versus that word?
Yeah.
And so is it a reflection on society, not necessarily?
Yeah, I don't think that's an example of the algorithm being racist. I think it's way harder to identify than those simple cases where the result ends up being something racist. But what we're talking about is the formula that goes into it is unintentionally, I think, almost always unintentionally racist. So I'm going to make up a hypothetical scenario because I don't know a good example of this, but like if, for example, part of, white culture was to link and share links with each other, and part of black culture was not, but to do, to share something on social or whatever. And then they write in their algorithm that the number one most important thing is links, and we're not going to count at all social, right? I'm just making up, like, this is totally out of left field. But in that sense, then you'd be favoring ranking signals that are inherently more popular in one demographic versus another. And the results that come back are then going to reflect that and kind of give a boost and advantage to one. So I don't know of like, because, we don't know all the intricacies of the Google algorithm, but that would be an example of the algorithm itself actually being racist. And again, unintentionally. So those are the more like difficult things to like find and recognize.
Plus Google is way more complex than that, meaning
right.
In that specific location where that search was made and it auto-corrected to black man stole my car, there's likely other areas or locations where the opposite would be true, potentially.
So then the question is it okay to sacrifice short-term, maybe long-term sales to push something that you feel is more important? We talked about, the dumb example is like a bad TikTok trend and you're trying to go in and start a new trend, right? A more real situation is you look at the technology field, right? One of the big pushes is we want to get more women into technology. Is it a matter of women naturally are less interested in tech than men? Or is it that women, or maybe, and there's a lot of studies that show there's truth to that. Is the reason that's true though, is because they don't see a lot of role models in tech. So again, marketer's job, you're shooting a commercial or you're doing something. Maybe I'm selling a fitness. I'm a weightlifting fitness brand, and traditionally we always just have like a bunch of white dudes, whatnot. I'm thinking we need to get some more women in here, even though most of our customers are men, and that's like 95% of our audience. We need to start stacking our commercials with some more women. I went from tech to this, but I feel like it's an easier example just with going with staffing versus shooting a commercial for more marketing purposes. But data might suggest that if we have women lifting the weights and and there's a guy in there and whatnot, we're not going to sell as many as when we have like 3 muscular guys working out. So I think that's a good example of I'm going to sell more because my audience, who right now is predominantly male, when they see other males working out, they're like, yes, I want to buy that equipment. When they see women working on the equipment, they don't identify as much. It may or may not pull more women in, which I'm assuming that's the goal of stacking more women in to expand the audience. But if you're consistently seeing maybe after 3 commercials that we're not seeing anything, we're actually losing sales, even though well, we need to get more women interested in this because I believe, or our company believes, this is for the greater good to do that. Again, maybe this is a bad example, but I feel like that's an example of sacrificing short-term, potentially long-term sales to push something that you believe or that society believes is the greater thing, right? And that's where I think it's interesting to define the audience. Like Paxton, you mentioned, like you've got to know what people are thinking, right? The world has a different ideology than just your audience. Is it our job to just understand our audience? Or is it our job to understand the world? We want to expand our audience, but there's boundaries that you're going to hit. Like not everybody is going to be a fan or a customer. And so at what point do you stop appeasing a certain group in order to focus on your group, even if outsiders are saying, well, what you're doing is wrong. You need to be more inclusive on this and this and this. Again, it sounds like I'm attacking one way or the other, but like, and these are extreme, and I get sensitive issues on some scales, but it goes back to that question of your job as a marketer. Is there a moral responsibility to push what you believe or what society believes is the greater good, even if it means sacrificing sales for your product within your world and your fans, if that makes sense? Target made a big move years ago, right? I think they were one of the first companies to feature 2 men on a Father's Day ad. And they got a lot of praise for it, and they got a lot of criticism for it, right? That was the marketing team, I'm sure, internally talking about, we could potentially take a big hit. We're doing something that we feel is important to our brand. We're going to push this. We may lose customers who are offended. We may gain customers on the outside. Again, that was their choice as a company, and that's whatever they want to do is whatever they want to do. Was that their responsibility as marketers to push that? Or again, is their job just to understand it, say, okay, well, most people at this time aren't comfortable with that kind of lifestyle. So therefore, we as marketers who understand the world, we're just going to stick with what people want. They made the choice to kind of go against the grain at the time and say, we're going to feature this, which is a different lifestyle than what most people at the time are comfortable with. Was, again, what they did was what they did, and that's their choice. There was no wrong or right answer there. It was, was that their responsibility?
Actually, I don't know that they went. I mean, what was it, 2 years ago, you said?
No, it was more than 2 years. It was more like, that feels like 2013 or 14. I mean, it's a different climate then and even now.
I feel like now
there's a lot of.
You're asking a yes or no question, but it's more complicated than that. Like it's a either yes and then explain something, or a no and then explain something. When you ask what a marketer's responsibility is, first of all, we don't know if it was the target marketing team that did that, or if the CEO said, hey, do this.
Sure.
In which case, is it their responsibility to listen to the CEO or not? Right. I mean, so there's that. Here's my opinion, and I guess that's what you're asking for. I don't think it's a marketer's responsibility to do anything other than build the business, acquire new customers. Now, in acquiring new customers, there are questions like that come up, right? Sure. I don't think, well, I'd say in most cases, there are probably some fringe cases that I would agree with. In fact, like the Target thing, I like that and there's motive behind it. I don't know, but I would say in most cases, if the question is, do we take a hit because we feel morally obligated to do this thing? I would say no. Don't take a hit.
I think there's other things to consider too. It's not about marketing's impact on a business. Obviously, there's the effect on the market and sales and all that. But there's also a longer term, potentially, probably longer term effect on the culture of a company, which will affect all the existing employees. That will affect who comes to apply at that company in the future. So like hiring prospects, if you position your company a certain way, and, just using that as an example, if you communicate, hey, everyone here is welcome, everyone here is included, you belong here. Like that could have a positive effect on their culture that would outweigh any costs associated from people who are angry about that kind of messaging. And it could swing the other way. And maybe there's a bunch of people who are like, I used to love working at Target, but I can't get behind this message. And, I don't know, it could change. But so there's marketing has big impacts beyond just the initial commercial impact.
Yeah, you're right. There are costs associated with turnover, which when weighed against the costs gained or lost with any marketing campaign, as seen holistically, it may be a net positive outcome when not just focused on marketing cost.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tricky. People with the microphone have a lot on their shoulders in terms of like what is their responsibility to the world, and using that microphone, like what are they supposed to do with it? And we as marketers, it's kind of a weird, unique position where we have a pretty big microphone and we're also behind the scenes. So we're not necessarily quite personally attached to what goes out there as opposed to like some influencer. So I don't know, there's a lot of interesting moral questions, but I agree with you, Jacob, in terms of like the absolute most clear responsibility that we have as marketers is to grow the companies that we work for. And if you don't like the culture or the company that you work for, then you need to have the guts to respond and either fix it or leave. And market forces should work for the better in that sense, where, if there's this company with a terrible message and terrible people, that no one wants to work for them. So I don't know the answer to all of this, but
I love the philosophical stuff though. I did 2 Google searches. I did one, what are the responsibilities of a marketer? And then I added one word to the second search, which was, what are the ethical responsibilities of a marketer? And the differences are stark and interesting. In the first, you get things like listen to the customer's needs, track trends, monitor competition, work brand values, search and use new marketing tools. I mean, just like the technical like job description. Whereas the ethical side, which is more interesting to me, and as I think about like job descriptions in that way, the first one is like just a list of here are the things that you're responsible for. But as I'm thinking through it, I'd rather see the second list on a job description that has things like honesty, responsibility, fairness, respect, transparency. And the last one, which I think is closest related to what we're talking about, is citizenship. It says fulfill all legal, economic, philanthropic, and societal responsibilities to all stakeholders, as well as give back to the community and protect the ecological environment.
Yeah. I think the magic is, and I feel like we've talked about this before, but the magic is when incentives align. So like a lot of people criticize cancel culture, and I think a lot of it can go too far if someone just makes a little tiny mistake and suddenly their life is ruined. I think that's crazy. But I think in America, at least, people are starting more and more, I think we could do it way more, but starting more and more to vote with our dollars. And if people truly care about equality, buy from businesses that support equality, because what that's going to do is incentivize those businesses who were either sitting on the fence or quiet or nothing. That gives them a financial incentive to change and to support that, which you could argue is bankrupt morally or whatever. But I'm of the opinion that if you get the desired outcome, largely, like in many cases, it doesn't really matter, like the motivator. Like if you're in it for money, but you're doing, like if you're doing good, but you're doing good for money, who cares? You're doing good. So I think if society can incentivize businesses to do what society wants it to do, that makes the job for marketers way easy, because, you know, there are marketers who are like, well, I personally don't really agree with this movement or whatever, but it makes dollars and cents for us. So let's support it, you know? So yeah, I don't know. I think the question is though, when you as a marketer feel like something is right and there is no financial incentive, in fact, there's almost a disincentive, then what do you do? You know? So I think the more, we're not the, like marketers aren't the only party involved in this, obviously, right? Like there's responsibility and burden on other shoulders. We're just one piece of the larger puzzle.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
Well, that was a good discussion. Went some parts. I love the heated debate on the Google search results there. It's been a while since we've had some hard back and forth on the Below the Fold. That's why we got Paxton back on
this guy
back in the show.
This guy over here, little bast.
We'll have to have a whole other breakdown, another episode on this. On the Google algorithm racist?
Well, that is an interesting topic. I mean, look at the demographic of who built it. That would be interesting. I mean, I don't know if we even have access to that, but
I mean, another algorithm that is like an example of this is Sony came out with, and this is kind of an older example, with cameras, their point and clicks that had blink detection. So if someone in the picture was blinking, it would notify you, or it would wait until you opened everyone in the picture had their eyes open. But like Asians, the algorithm kept saying they're blinking. And so like that right there is an example of when you're building the rules, you are assuming the world is this way and painting those pictures across the board. And you're not thinking about other scenarios that don't fit in with the rules you've built into your algorithm, right? And so those things are so hard to see that it takes like real effort to sit back. And I think there's many things that we're dealing with that fall into that we just don't see right now. So yeah, that's an example, I guess, of an algorithm being racist.
I would say, I feel like racist and lack of diversity understanding, I feel like it's two different things. I feel like racism is like an active, like I'm intentionally doing something, right? Versus like, oh wow, I didn't stop to.
I used to think that.
Like if I make a product that works for people with two legs, and then all of a sudden I realize, oh man, there's like a giant group of people who have one leg who have a hard time using this. It's not like I'm anti one leg people.
No,
okay,
it's
wow. No, it's ignorance is not an excuse. Meaning, if you don't know that you're being racist, it doesn't mean that you're not racist.
Yeah.
And go ahead, Pax.
Yeah, I feel like this has gotten like huge amounts of debate recently, but I've always believed that the word racism or ageism or sexism basically means you take, you assign attributes to somebody based off of their race or their sex or their age, and apply that across the board. Like everyone who is this age has these characteristics. Everyone who is this gender has these characteristics or this race. And whether like it could be for good or for bad. Like if you say like millennials are just so smart, that's ageist. Like you're taking an attribute and applying it to everybody that is a millennial, which is wrong. Like I
Not
think
only is that wrong, but that statement is wrong.
I mean, the thing is though, like our brains are designed to find patterns. Like that's how we survive. We, we think, you see that bush contains a berry that I can eat. And then you build this rule in your brain that bush will always contain berries that I can eat. And for that, something that simple, that algorithm that works, but it breaks down when you get into larger society, and we like to build these patterns of, hey, someone with this skin color is like this. And just because you see it 9 out of 10 times does not mean that is true. Right. But it's just, I don't know, our brains operate off of assumptions. We assume everything, and we assume many things just to get through our day because we can't sit there and question everything. But many times those assumptions cause harm to lots of people, totally unintentional by many people, but regardless of intention, doesn't matter. It's still causing harm to others. Those assumptions.
I've also thought some about this. Part of what I've been thinking about is this is one of the most worldwide revolutions that we've seen in our lifetimes and probably for generations. For the protests that have recently been happening, last week there were protests on the same day in all 50 states and like 13 countries. It was the biggest movement in the history of mankind for any cause. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, something so big and so powerful, and everyone has the hope and dreams of change happening, but we have hundreds of years and generations of behavior placed upon us. Everybody does. And I was thinking, even as a parent, I look back at how my dad was, and my dad is an amazing person, but growing up, he had his flaws. And there were things that I hated about him as a parent that I never, ever thought I would emulate. But as a parent, I'm emulating them. I get angry and I just do things that I never thought I would do, but then it happens and I'm like, that's my dad. That's my dad right there. And guess what? It was his dad too, and likely his dad. Yeah. And so we have generations of behavior, and all of a sudden there's this expectation that we change immediately. And I'm generalizing here, which is something we just warned against. But right now, I want more than anything for change to happen. But the expectation, we also need to manage our own expectations that it's taken years for us to get to the point we're at now. And it's going to take even more years for it to get better in this one cause and all causes that we expect and require change. Yeah. And bringing this now into the marketing sector, I think it's the same exact thing. I mean, marketing and advertising has been around for a long time, but we've inherited the tools, we've inherited the behaviors from the professionals before us. I mean, kind of like the professional generations of time. And it's going to take time for us to understand what our moral and occupational responsibilities are as a society and as, to our organization or our company. Anyway, all that is just to say, it's going to take time.
I think one of the most powerful things to help fix this, and I agree that it will take time. One of the most powerful things we can do is just constantly develop the habit of asking why. I had this debate with my dad a couple months ago, and I don't know how we got on the topic of parenting, but I was just like, I want as my goal, like whenever my kid, if I tell him to do something and he asks why, I never want to say because I said so. I want to tell him why and help him ask that question and understand why.
What about the 10th why?
Well, yeah. The reason I think it's so powerful is because it causes us to question those traditions that have been passed down. There's that story of the woman who she would cut the end off of her roast every time before she would cook it, and she would cut off an inch or whatever. And her husband's like, why did you cut off an inch of that? You're wasting perfectly good meat. She's like, I don't know. My mother always did it. Then she asked her mother, why did you always do it? Why did you always cut an inch off of it? She's like, I don't know. My mom always did it. So then she asked her grandma, I was like, why did you cut an inch off the roast? She's like, well, because the pan that I had was only this size and I needed to cut it off so it could fit there. An actual real life example of this is at 97th floor. I one day I just looked up and I saw, clients that were a certain level, they were getting this particular number of links, and it was 12 within a certain time period. They were getting 12 links. And I thought, like, why are they getting 12 links? And I went and I asked them, like, why this number exactly? And they came back and it's like, well, when you were my manager, you told me to build 12. And I was like, well, why did I ask them to build 12? And I realized it's because Jacob, when he was my manager, asked me to build 12. And I never questioned it. I just said 12. And then 12 seems like a nice number. And I kept on going. And that lasted for years after Jacob had left. I don't know why Jacob decided 12. It was like 12 to 15 was like the number. So then I was like, okay, forget this. Forget 12. We're going to have a way better system for determining how many links a client needs in order to be successful. I think if as a society, if we can always ask why, like, why do we open the door for somebody? Why do we stand when someone walks in the room? Why do we shake hands? Why do we, like, shaking hands is an interesting one. Like, why do we even do that? And I think it goes back to like proving you don't have weapons or something, which is like totally not even relevant to our society anymore. But if we ask why, then we can understand the important things that should continue. Because I think sometimes we're also a little gung-ho about tearing things down that actually have a reason. We just have forgotten what that reason was. But it also allows us to tear down those things that are no longer relevant and have no place in what we want to have as a society. So just constantly asking why. Everything you do, every thought you have, ask, like, why am I thinking this? Why did I do this? Like, why did my family do this growing up? And then same thing in marketing. Like, why are we buying ads this way? Why are we even doing radio? Why are we doing this? Well, why, like, constantly asking why, that's the key to breaking loose from the chains of tradition and stagnant thought.
Yeah. No,
Leave
I
it
totally
to Paxton
agree.
to always end us on just a good note. Good marketing lesson.
Brandon, this is the third time Brandon's tried to wrap up.
Yeah.
I do have a meeting I got to get to in 8 minutes, but this was good. If I say, if you are by chance watching or listening on YouTube, would love to hear your comments on this topic and what you think. Leave them down below.
Anyone else?
Anyone else?
Care about your
screw
opinion.
you.
Get you.
Yeah. Well, that's all for today, folks. I don't know why I'm always the one that's like wrapping it up now. It used to be Jacob, but
Dude, yeah, I'm kind of loving it, man.
Maybe
Ever
I'm
since
just-
we got rid of the
maybe I'm
intro
just-
and stuff,
yeah.
it's just like now Brandon's like taking care of the topic, and
I feel
I
like
just have to show up.
there's like this YouTube like obligation to start it off and wrap it up. But anyway,
Did we plan this topic? Is there a sheet somewhere that has topics?
Brandon put it
right
on
before the
Slack right
show,
before.
I just was
Oh,
like,
okay.
oh,
I didn't see that.
we could talk about this. Anyway,
Okay.
thank you, everybody.
Sounds good. See you guys. Have a good day.
Adios.
Ciao.